that's a horrible thing to say to someone you don't know. You don't even know what they're here for, what they're talking about. And it's just, I mean, we've all got it. I'm sure people in the room have got it. It literally just for changing your mind and voting a certain way and, you know, wanting to protect children. And it's not even about whether we agree, but to call someone, and we just rattle these words off like they're meaningless now, you know, Nazi and racist. And I think it's just such a horrible thing. And nothing good will come from that. And all it does is really, because we are growing, you know, people are walking away from the Democrat Party, and all it does is kind of like reinforce your decision to walk away when you are, because I've never called someone that for voting Democrat or disagreeing with me. I know that it happens, everyone's human, but I don't see that as much. When you leave the Democrat Party, I see more diversity of thought on this side and ability to disagree on different subjects like abortion or whatever the case may be. It's not over there, because, you know, like I said, in my experience, I checked all the boxes, believed everything, all the LGBT, but had a question about why can't I go to work, and then I was persona non grata. So it's like you can check all the boxes, but if you misstep at all, and that is very cult-like, actually, then you will be, they will come after you, even if you know, agree with everything else. So that is a problem, and, you know, just observation.
Yeah. Were you about to say something?
Oh God, the other day I had a MAGA hat on, and this little old man with his wife come by, and he had some words for me. And he was like, "You need to see a psychiatrist." That's probably true for other reasons, but I was like, "Why?" And he's like, "That hat represents hate. You must hate gay people." I hate gay people,
But you do. But
I mean, that is kind of true, but it's I just find it so funny that it's like, it's straight people telling gay people how to think. It's white liberals telling black people how they have to think. They really do think that minorities are like their, not just their property, but like their little Make-A-Wish kids.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
As you mentioned the Democrat Party and emotional manipulation, one of the things that kept being brought about in my conversation today was this idea that truth is subjective, and it just depends on who you're talking to and what society you live in. And the thing about that is, like, if that's the case and truth is subjective, you can also say the same thing about hate speech. Like, what do you mean by hate speech? You can just literally fill in the blank to support whatever agenda, whatever narrative that you have. So people were coming up to me and saying, "You're hateful." I'm like, "Well, what do you mean by hateful?" And so, is being hateful telling the truth? It was in regards to the transing the kids thing. And so they said, "Well, you're hateful." I said, "Well, I love people enough that I'm going to tell them the truth. If it hurts their feelings, that's a different conversation. But if you're saying hateful, then where are you getting that authority from to make the rules that something is hateful, you know?" And that gives politicians so much power, because then they can label someone as a Nazi or a racist or whatever, and the common folk will hear that and say, "Well, obviously I'm not going to vote for them." Like, the amount of people that I was talking to today that all they had to talk about was Trump. And I said, "Okay, well, can you tell me about, like, who you're supporting? Do you know about Agenda 2030? And no one knew what I was talking about. They just kept saying Project 2025. And I'm like, well, that's the problem. It's like you're so focused on hating the other side that you don't even know what's going on behind your back, because they're just pulling on our heartstrings, essentially."
I do think that there's obviously like bias on, you know, if you watch Fox News, of course, you're going to see some sort of slant or bias in a conservative direction. Like, I don't deny that whatsoever. I do think, and I think studies have even shown, that the majority of the mainstream media is overwhelmingly, I mean, like 90% leftist or Democrat. Do I even remember why I just brought this point up? What did you just say?
I have no idea.
It's okay, because I'll come back to it. It'll come back to me in a second. But you were making a point earlier about like conversations that you have with people, and your reasons why for walking away. And it's always astounded me that when I made the decision to walk away, to this day, it's now been like 7.5 years since I left. I did lose more than 90% of my friends. People stopped inviting me to barbecues and like, you know, parties and get-togethers, and stopped returning my phone calls and text messages, whatever. But I, to this day, have literally never had one single person reach out to me and say, "Tell me why you changed your mind. Like, help me understand why you changed your mind." And like, even if we can't agree about it, or even if we have like an argument or a debate about it, the point I was going to make about the media was something along the same lines. But I think although I think that there's bias on both sides, I do think that there's probably, I think, more of a willingness, I think, from people on, oh, I know what it was, I got it, boom. there's a woman today that I was arguing with out in the courtyard, and it was amazing to me because I knew based off of every word coming out of her mouth what shows she watches. Like, I knew exactly. And the thing is, like, I don't really feel like that exists so much on the other side. The thing that really scares me about a lot of people on the left, and I'm not going to generalize and say everyone, but a significant number of people on the left, is the willingness to just lap up and absorb whatever the talking point is of that particular day. I mean, the moment that they told everyone to start saying insurrection, the left started saying insurrection. The moment that they said Trump is going to be a dictator on day one, oh my God, he's going to be a dictator on day one, oh my God. And this woman that I was arguing with today, she was literally just regurgitating every new talking point that's come out in the last like 2 or 3 weeks. Because they're really ramping up the rhetoric about him being a dictator and a neo-Nazi and a tyrant and all this. And if he gets elected, it's going to be, you know, this. I mean, they've been saying that for a while, but it's getting really bad because I personally believe they're actually trying to get him killed. And it's heading more and more in that direction. But it's really disturbing, I think, when you're having a conversation. I kept telling this woman, I was like, I feel sorry for you because you've really handed on a silver platter a significant portion of your brain to the media and just allowed them to have it. You just gave it to them, and you're brainwashed, and you don't even know that you're brainwashed. I'm not brainwashed, you're brainwashed. Oh my God, he's gonna be a dictator on day one. Didn't you hear him say it? I'm like, it's gonna be a bloodbath. He said it's gonna be a bloodbath, and I'm like, oh my God, I can't with you. Go ahead.
Speaking of, I mean, they're the ones committing the bloodbath. You see Joe Biden giving his speech with the red background. He looked like friggin' Lucifer. And I mean, at this point with Trump, one thing, by the way, that I think is very interesting is Democrats claim that they're running on our democracy. They're saving not just democracy, our democracy.
Yeah.
They've got to market their slogans.
It's fragile.
Yeah, but I think it's very interesting. They have tried to get Donald Trump thrown off the ballot. They tried to get RFK thrown off the ballot. They tried to get Jill Stein thrown off the ballot. Sounds like
Sanders.
Communism to me.
Yeah.
Well,
And I mean,
they have a nominee who wasn't nominated.
Yeah, oh yeah, how can I forget that?
That's also, which actually Black Lives Matter called out on Twitter when we've been on a big campaign against that, which I actually admire them for because we have a nominee of one of the major parties who not a single American voted for, which I don't think is correct.
That was the broken clock being right.
Yeah.
And who actually ran in 2020 and was like one of the lowest polling candidates on the Democrat ticket at a time when there were like 38 people running on the Democrat ticket, and I think she was polling over like 1%.
Zero delegates.
Right, 0 delegates, yeah, and 0 primary votes. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I know a lot of like your.
Oh, can we,
I'm coming. Yeah, I'm not sure if it works, honestly.
It's for the camera.
Oh, it's for the camera? Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I noticed a lot of your changing your mind has come from like kind of realizing the institutions are corrupt or whatever, and like losing your trust in institutions. Do you think that there's any like role for institutional conservatives to play in the political movement? Like people who have conservative beliefs who still like have trust in our institutions and kind of reject the kind of right-wing populism that's kind of grown in the last couple of years? Do you think there's like, any purpose or any like role for institutional conservatives?
I was just going to ask what that would be, because when you say that rejects right-wing populism, to me that just sounds like the status quo, the same thing that we have, that they might as well be Democrats, because it really was the flip side of right-wing populism that was on board with the lockdowns and the mandates and all of that.
Yeah, can I clarify? Yeah, for sure. When I mean institutional conservative, I mean that someone who believes that like, yeah, like there's a lot of media's like bias, but like at the end of the day, like they're telling what they think is the truth, and so overall, we're gonna like, if you just like, it's not like, oh, the government, everyone's like lying to you. It's more so that they're misinformed, or maybe like they just get stuff wrong occasionally. It's not like that everyone's like lying to you, if that makes sense.
Oh, I disagree.
Are you defining an institutional conservative as like somebody who was a conservative before the kind of populist movement towards Trump? Is that what you're saying?
Kind of, like someone who has social conservative views, like on like LGBT, someone who has like socially conservative views, stuff like on LGBT rights and stuff like that, but like overall, like still has trust in the institutions, like wants to be a Republican, but really can't because of like the populism that's kind of taken over the party, if that makes sense.
No, I get it. And my answer to that, I guess, would be that I think, especially probably for the people on this panel, we walked away from a party that we really believed in at one point, and maybe we did kind of go on autopilot. I mean, I'm sure I probably didn't. I wasn't really like looking under the hood as carefully as I should have been. But I think once you get to the point where you realize that you're walking away from a party or a system that's become corrupt, the last thing in the world you want to do is join more tribalism. So I mean, I personally am a big fan of a diverse and broad spectrum of opinions. I think we need a healthy two-party system, and I think we even need healthy diversity of thought within the political parties. I mean, there is kind of a civil war, obviously, that's been happening within the Republican Party for a long time between the establishment versus MAGA, right, or America First, or whatever you want to call it. But I don't think, I joined the Republican Party because of MAGA, and I do consider myself to be, I am an America First Republican, but I have issues with MAGA too. And so I would want to think that anybody who feels strongly about something and is passionate about their political beliefs would have a voice, and that there would be a place for anybody to have a healthy input in the dialogue and the conversation.
Yeah, I think a reckoning is happening right now on the right that I don't think is happening amongst Democrats, because they push you out, like RFK and Tulsi and everyone else. Obviously, there are people who are very socially conservative and don't like a lot of what Trump has done, don't like a lot of the populism, and it is hard navigating that because you don't want to lose your values. Obviously, the Republican Party recently changed their platform on a couple things and that ruffled some feathers. But I think that right now we have a choice, and there is a clear lesser of two evils. Every time it's a lesser of two evils, no matter who you're voting for, because they're not Christ, so it's a lesser of two evils. We're all sinful. And I think what that is the more we become the big tent, whether it is right-wing populism or MAGA or traditional social conservatism, you're more likely to bend someone's ear as opposed to when they're all the way over there, because the Democrats are becoming increasingly radical, increasingly left, and there is room over there for you to be a moderate, for you to be a centrist, so everyone is kind of like naturally gravitating over here. And ultimately, I think that's a good thing, but it does cause concern. I'm a pretty conservative person. It does cause concern, and I think that that's valid. And it's kind of like navigating that, and I think we're still figuring it out. But it is an interesting thing that we're having. We kind of had like a mini civil war during the primary, because some people really didn't want, and they're still writing in other people, And again, that's not happening on the other side. So I think we're going to end up healthier for it, stronger for it. I personally don't think that Trump is the end-all be-all. He's not going to be here for forever, probably maybe not very long at all if they have their way. So we have to navigate it, without him, and figure it out without him, what it means to be, a patriotic American, and what it means to be a conservative, and what it means to be a Republican, etc. I don't know if that answered your question, but I think we're still kind of like figuring it out, and I see both sides of it. Yeah.
Yes.
So I engaged most of you this afternoon, and I tend to agree with a lot of things you guys are saying, but something really struck me with one of you guys I spoke to. I said, why, my question with framing these posters and kind of, in my opinion, I believe it was kind of antagonizing to college students, and I don't believe that's right. I think the response I got was, well, the left is doing it, why can't the right do it? And this kind of, I've had my rude awakening too, just like you guys. I've had my own disillusionment, and I'm not a citizen of the U.S. That's how bad it is, right? Like the fact that I have my own awakening, not being an American. But my issue was that would it be right to use the tit for tat strategy? If the left is doing it, the right should do it, or would it be better as as an organization, as a party, as people of the party, to kind of say that, hey, they're doing this and this and this. Let's not do that. Let's approach this with maturity, with sensibility, with rational thought, with all these different viable things, instead of, oh, if they do it, let's do it. Because sometimes these right-wing movements, although very well-meaning, as I tend to be one of the few guys that can see the underlying message, and I tend to agree with it. What I disagree with, and kind of want to get your perspective, you guys' perspective on how maybe you guys would want to change or approach it, going to other campuses or other institutions where, how do you intend to work on framing things to kind of invite constructive, healthy conversation instead of just antagonizing, the reactions we saw from students today. Oh yeah, the reactions we saw today were more hostile than productive. We can all agree on that. I think the guy kicking down that sign you mentioned, and the guy blasting music in front of the interview, like that's not civic mindedness, right? That is kind of, I believe that's the woke mind virus, right? But my question would be, how would you guys want to approach framing your kind of ideology in a way where it invites constructive conversation rather than hostility and.
I answered this question earlier. I don't think you liked my answer. I don't know. Do you want to go? I don't mind saying it again, but if you want to go first or.
Oh yeah, we kind of spoke about it earlier, and I don't think
Yeah.
I'm necessarily the person who gave you that answer. I think I took your feedback. I think number one, we do want people to stop and talk to us. And number two, I think no matter what, some people are going to be hostile because we are saying strong opinions that even if they're not inflammatory, they are inflammatory to certain people because they can't accept any kind of difference of opinion or you're a Nazi, you know, etc. But I mean, I don't know. I think it is a valid point too that some of this stuff has been said to us in reverse. And I see your side, but I also think, again, this is also like a reckoning that's happening. I believe that Democrats only care about power, and they are willing to use the rules to their advantage. I don't know if everyone else is doing that right now. And I don't want to continue to lose. I want to win. I want good people in power. I see your point, like isolated on college campuses and having, discussions, which I think is what we're having right now. I think it's harder to have that in the context of a quad with signs in the heat and all that. That's harder and people yelling. This is a little bit easier. But I also think that there is room for us being more fierce because I do want to see good people with sane and rational ideas who actually know what a woman is to be in charge. And so I don't know that we need to always, I mean, I'm a Christian, so this is hard to navigate. We take the high road so much, and we follow the rules, and like if Trump gets in office, I don't think he's going to go out, politically persecute his rivals. He didn't lock her up, there was chanting of lock her up. He didn't say that. He never locked her up, and look at where we are now and what they're trying to do to Trump. I think that we kind of need to push back a little bit and use the rules to our advantage sometimes. And I know that's different than what you're asking, but I kind of think we need to balls up a little bit. Yeah, I mean, there's room for that. So, just a different perspective.
That was really good. I think the other thing that I would add is it's not necessarily that we're trying to do to them what they did to us. It's that do we value free speech or do we don't? And I think if you have some kind of a sign that's going to welcome a certain reaction, it doesn't mean that these people have to act on that reaction. And these politicians, they're banking on this sort of visceral response so then they can count on you to vote for censorship, for example. So instead of you calling me, I was called a dickhead, a hoe, like a bunch of things today, and it's like, just answer the question. Let's talk about the ideas. Let's work through the ideas. Let's have a conversation. And instead we got, what we had today, which some conversations were good, some were not, but I think that's the point is, if we value free speech, and we're on a university campus, which is the most alarming thing, we should be able to talk about these things.
I mean, I feel like you sort of articulated my perspective probably a little bit in a, kinder way than I did. I mean, not that it was like that bad, but yeah. I mean, it's essentially sort of what I said to you as well. I mean, your point was like, okay, well, if it's bad when the left does it, why would you then turn around and do it too? And I mean, essentially what I said to you before is that, and remember, I didn't vote for Trump in 2016. I voted for Hillary, and I was one of the people lashing out at Trump supporters until I ultimately left in 2017, and then I voted for Trump in 2020. But I've been a Trump supporter now longer than I wasn't a Trump supporter. And I've sat around and I've watched as people for 8 years have taken the high road, tried to be the nice person, tried to just basically say oh, if we just extend a hand in kindness and we and as far as I'm concerned, it's gotten worse. It's not gotten better, it's gotten worse. And by the way, this idea that I can't tell you the number of people on campus, and by the way, I probably interacted with at least 100 kids today, and I kept hearing from so many of them, words have power and you should think about the way that you say things, and I think that, saying things in a hyperbolic way it's not nice and it's not kind, and I'm like, do you understand how many times you guys have called us Nazis, racists, bigots, Hitler lovers, whatever? Well, yeah, but yeah, and I'm like, so why is it okay when you do it? And it's not, and I honestly think that we're to this point, and frankly, maybe getting people a little incensed with a sign is not even actually tit for tat as far as I'm concerned, because they're at the point now where they're actually raiding people, locking people up, putting people in jail, and destroying people's lives, and weaponizing our justice system to literally destroy people. I mean, we're just giving them a taste of the rhetoric that they use against us all the time.
And none of our signs, I mean, not to play victim, because we willingly came and we enjoyed it, I think, and nobody made us do it. but none of our signs warranted some of the reactions we got. I mean, even the most, whatever you would find the most egregious ones didn't warrant it. I was holding one that said reject black privilege, and someone told me that I want to genocide black people. I mean, to get from A to Z like that is a little bit, I can see if you have a truly egregious sign, a truly awful sign, something very, you know, like something actually Nazi, that would be, but none of our signs deserve some of the responses that we got. So I think that also has to be on the table too, while I do think that you have, you know, a valid concern. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're totally fine. You know, so, you know, obviously, Mikey and I are both gay men, you know, and if we had been, if we were gay kids today, I think we would very much be at risk of this new sweeping trend to trans any kid who exhibits any signs of being, you know, feminine or masculine or, you know, not normative in some way, which is really odd, I think, for a party that celebrates its non-normativeness. But there is kind of this epidemic that's happening now of people being considered trans who are not actually trans, and we all have different opinions about different things. I personally am totally supportive of if somebody wants to transition from male to female or male to female to male, whatever. I totally support that. I have no issue with that whatsoever. But we have parts of the country now where like 25% of teenagers are identifying as part of the LGBTQI community, and it's because they're considering themselves to be transgender when they're not transgender because there's a social contagion. This has become
the woke mind virus.
Well, yeah, absolutely. It's become like a trend. So, you know, we had a sign today, and like, believe me, we were like laughing our asses off when we made this sign. But it said, "You're not trans. You're just autistic." And thank you. It's funny, right?
Thank you.
Yeah. But the reason why, okay, obviously there was a nicer way to say that, right? But if I made a sign that said, "Did you know that there are people in this world who are preying on autistic kids and telling them that they're transgender," with that, like, how many people would stop and have a conversation with me about that sign? But we had so many people come up to us because we had a sign that said, "You're not really trans, you're just autistic." And they were like, "What?" You know, and then we had an opportunity to explain what we meant by that and to explain that we're not just doing this because it's fun to make people mad. We're doing this because there are actually like lesbian and gay people who are having their bodies permanently mutilated as children because people are telling their parents or teachers or whatever that this is a transgender child. When in fact, if that child were allowed to grow up, in all likelihood, they would outgrow what they feel to be their gender dysphoria. That's just one example. Sorry, what were you going to say?
I want to say, in terms of the woke mind virus, I mean, you look at some of these people, not talking about anybody in this room who might disagree with us, I appreciate you guys being here, but some of these people that we encounter on a day-to-day basis are truly possessed. And so you need to know the minds you can change and the minds you can't change. And there is no amount of gingerly speaking words and tap dancing around things that will ever make them not act like the demons they appear to be. And I just completely reject this idea that the right needs to be more fragile and more soft. We've had too much of that. When it comes to the woke mind virus, the only thing these people understand is strength. The two things that beat the woke mind virus, strength and humor. And the two things I believe in the most. Yeah.
Hey, so a question, I think I talked to you guys earlier today as well. A question when it comes to Trump, not about his policies, but about his rhetoric. So, don't you think that he's bad for American culture when he says things like they're eating the dogs, and that leads to an uptick in violence against, Haitian immigrants? When he says, like during 2020, when he kept calling, the coronavirus the China virus, and that led to an uptick in violence against Asian people, and we saw Asian women getting killed in the streets, and the murderers using, citing the reason as being